All right, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to take you on a bit of a musical archaeology dig today. We're going to uncover the hidden and, honestly, sometimes shocking historical threads that connect modern rock hits directly back to their acoustic roots. If you're a music lover, get ready, because you're about to hear your favorite playlists in a completely new way. Let's kick things off with a deceptively simple question. Who really wrote your favorite rock anthem? Seems straightforward, right? But the answer, well, it might just shatter what you thought you knew about the music you love. Because as we're going to see, the music industry is basically built on this massive, echoing foundation of borrowed sorrow, stolen riffs, and forgotten pioneers. Moving into Section 1, Famous Covers, Hidden Origins. We're starting off with what you already know. Those massive, undeniable rock anthems that have literally filled stadiums for decades. And we're going to pull the rug right out from under you. Just think about Kurt Cobain's iconic, completely angst-ridden 1993 MTV Unplugged performance with Nirvana. He's singing Where Did You Sleep Last Night? And those final despair-filled screams, they practically shatter his voice. But if you trace that track back, its actual origin stretches to a 1944 recording by the legendary blues giant Leadbelly. So what millions of 90s grunge fans thought was this raw, pure expression of Seattle angst, it was actually an acoustic folk and blues standard from literally half a century earlier. And it's the exact same story with Led Zeppelin. In 1971, they introduced millions of people to the heavy, thunderous classic When the Levee Breaks. But again, trace it back, and you'll find it was originally a 1929 acoustic blues track by Kansas Joe McCoy and Memphis Minnie. And the context here is absolutely crucial. Memphis Minnie was playing lead guitar on a song directly inspired by the real-life, devastating Great Mississippi Flood of 1927. So that stadium-shaking drumbeat from the 70s, it was literally born from a devastating natural disaster in the 1920s. As Kerrang! Magazine highlights, taking an older, sometimes wildly different track, and injecting it with the over-the-top excess of hard rock, well, that's a storied tradition. Look at Hole, taking a jittery, kind of emotionless post-punk track by Young Marble Giants and turning it into a frantic, feedback-heavy screamer. Or Limp Bizkit adding deafening screams to George Michael's feel-good 1987 hit, Faith. We even see punk icons like The Clash making I Fought the Law completely their own, despite the fact that it was written by Sonny Curtis way back in 1958. Honestly, the electric volume is often just a fresh coat of paint on a classic foundation. All right, that brings us to Section 2, the folk revival pipeline. So the big question is, how did electric rock bands in the late 60s, 70s, and beyond actually find these forgotten acoustic blues and folk songs? They didn't have the internet, right? To answer that, we have to look at how these songs actually traveled. Just look at the incredible winding history of the song Babe, I'm Going to Leave You. It starts in the 1950s with Anne Brudden, who was a math student at Cal Berkeley. She writes this dry-eyed dirge for doomed love. Fast forward, and it flows to the 1962 debut live album of folk queen Joan Baez. And then, finally, in 1968, a young Robert Plant stumbles across Baez's record in Jimmy Page's Boathouse. They totally bond over it and record their heavy, testosterone-fueled version for their brand new band, Led Zeppelin. It's wild. This timeline shows us exactly how an intimate campus folk song morphed into a global metal masterpiece. But why did this pipeline exist in the first place? Well, communities like the 1960s Berkeley folk scene acted as vital preservers of the past. Local institutions like the Berkeley Folk Music Festival and those late-night radio hootenannies, specifically KPFA's Live Midnight Special, they acted as a direct conduit. They welcomed touring musicians and local students alike, broadcasting traditional music over the airwaves. This basically ensured that these acoustic roots reached an entirely new generation of hungry young musicians. Now let's dig even further back into our musical archaeology dig for Section 3, the pre-war blues masters. We're going straight to the raw originators of these sounds. Way before the massive electric amplifiers of Chicago or London were even a blip on the radar, there was country blues. This was a largely rural, pre-electric style born in the Mississippi Delta and Texas, right between 1925 and World War II. And the reason this matters so much is that this very specific localized phenomenon completely and utterly laid the structural foundation for the 20th century rock and pop music that we're all still listening to today. You know what's really fascinating? These early tracks were recorded on highly primitive equipment using low-quality shellac. But instead of ruining the music, that rough, desolate auditory distance and surface crackle actually makes the emotional impact feel incredibly haunting. It genuinely enhances those timeless, universal sentiments of loneliness, doom, and isolation that these artists were singing about. It doesn't push you away, it forces you to lean in and really feel the music. Just look at how deeply these pre-war blues masters are revered by modern critics. You have noted critic Grail Marcus calling Richard Rabbit Brown's 1927 track James Alley Blues simply the greatest record ever made. No caveats. And I think this brilliantly proves a fundamental truth about music. You absolutely do not need a massive studio budget, auto-tune, or digital perfection to capture raw, unparalleled human emotion. And that brings us perfectly to today and Section 4, our endless retro obsession. It is so fascinating to see how modern music fans are still, right now, desperately hunting for these exact same vintage feelings. Check out this quote from a recent Reddit thread. It perfectly captures the modern listener's craving. This user is actively searching out that specific mid-century aesthetic, calling it the Fallout series style. They want that unique 1950s vibe that seamlessly marries upbeat, fast sounds with surprisingly dark or sad lyrics. It's that exact tension between the sound and the story that made the original blues and folk so incredibly compelling in the first place. All these decades later, and we're still chasing that ghost. So, when we zoom out and look at the big picture, we finally see the true, undeniable genius of American music. The electric volume, the heavy distortion, the stadium-filling angst of rock, it's ultimately just a modern mask. It's a really loud, brilliant disguise for the desolate, acoustic, and intimate heart of the country blues and folk music that came decades before it. The packaging changes for sure, but the raw human emotion underneath remains exactly the same. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a little something to ponder. If modern rock is simply an electric echo of the 1920s and 30s, what future stadium anthems are secretly waiting right now, just gathering dust in the forgotten, crackling shellac records of our past? The next time you hear a massive rock hit on the radio, I want you to ask yourself, am I listening to the future, or am I just hearing a very loud ghost from 1927? Thanks for coming on this musical archaeology dig with me. Keep listening closely.